Sorry, go for it.
Okay.
So if anybody doesn't want to show their face, so you can keep your camera off. It's being recorded. But yes, go for it. We'll start off with Elaine. Introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine. My last name is Anne. Um, I just wanted to know, like, are there more designers in here or more founders, like tech founders in here? Can we have a show of hands of designers, maybe? Okay. Okay, some. All right. Okay. All right. So my background is so you can see the title, it's fractional CXO. So right now one of my businesses is we are helping tech startups who mostly only have like business and tech people and completely missing the UX strategy, product market fit skill set to help them find user traction ASAP before they burn out all their investors' money. So that's what I do.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, there's not a lot of people with CXO, and it's very good to see more people with CXO titles coming around at the C level. It's
Yeah.
because we need that. I think we need more of that.
Okay. Yeah,
Next,
I can explain more details as we go. Yeah.
okay, perfect. Alana, I'll have you introduce yourself next.
Hey everybody, nice to see you here. My name's Alana. I lead UX and all design things at a company called Future Primitive. We build cultural and technical primitives in predominantly the Web3 space, so all things NFTs, blockchain, and things like that.
Mhm. Thank you, Alana. Nitek, go for it.
Hey everyone, my name is Natik. I'm based in Vancouver. I'm tuning in from Seattle today. And I am a designer. And over the last few years of my design journey, I've focused more of that in and around startups. I've started two myself. I've been a part of one, and I'm currently in the process of launching a fourth one in stealth. So I'm excited to share what I can to help out.
Mhm. Always working on a lot of projects, Nitek, like secretly looking and peeking into all. So excited to see what you'll come up with next. I guess let's get started with the most burning question, which is the title of our event. So how can tech startups be sure that they're building the right product? Who would like to go first?
Sorry. Okay. All right. So you're asking which of us? Or
Anyone who would like to just go for it, tackle the question.
Go
And
for it, Elaine.
okay, well, depending on the audience, like because like if we have more designers in the room, then we probably want to tell designers how they can convince tech startup founders how to build the right product, right? If there's more actual tech founders in the room, then it's more about like telling them how we help tech startups do it, right? Any feedback from the room, like which angle you want us to talk more about?
Let's start.
Founder
Let's
here.
start with
Okay.
founders. Yes.
Convince C-level. It seems like both, right?
Mhm.
Okay, well, we can start with the founder angle first. Yeah. So I've already been in this industry, like product market fit user experience for 28 years. I've also mentored a lot of tech startups before. I'm a mentor at the Founder Institute, Western Canada. So in my experience, a lot of tech startups, what they do is they usually start a business because they themselves have a pain point, right? So they assume the rest of the world has the same pain point. And usually what happens is they'll find a co-founder who's like a tech co-founder, and then raise up some money, like 3 F's, like friends, family, and fools money, right? And already start jumping into building the product, like coding, if it's a software, mobile or web product. But however, a lot of times what I see is they will, build the product, and all the way into 1 year, they will find out that, how come nobody is signing up for my product, or why people are not paying for my product? And that's when they run into issues, and they already their money in the bank is dwindling, right? So that's usually when some of the tech startups like somehow find us, or through angel investors that refers them to us. So yeah, this is the very typical pain point that I see. So my suggestion is to not build first, is to validate first. And you can validate this with a PDF, which is what some of my clients, my previous clients like Google, they go to China, they bring a PDF and they test it with end users way before they build or code the product.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Very,
that's my
mhm. Very well said. There is a lot of testing, and MVP goes, a lot of work goes through an MVP, which we don't even know if it's like an actual MVP or not, and which is it tackling the correct problem and all. Hence why definitely very valid, everything you just said. Who, maybe Alana can go next to answer this question? What's your
Yeah, yeah, totally. I will share a super helpful resource called the Double Diamond of Design. If you're a designer, you've probably seen this. If you're pure business, perhaps you haven't seen this before, but it's incredibly helpful in understanding designing first the right thing and then designing the thing right. And so specifically for our use case, it can be a bit complicated in Web3 because you're dealing with new behavioral paradigms, you're dealing with people who, just like regular people, don't know what they want, but you're also dealing with technologies that have a lot of barriers to entry. So running through this diamond can help you kind of formulate your hypotheses and assumptions about, how to go about the problems in the first place, and then perhaps how to prototype solutions. So I'm just going to share this in here in the chat. I think from where I'm standing with our company, we kind of dabble in more experimental things. So we are purposely trying to do things differently and do things that seem a little bit weird. Like, for example, we're experimenting with what is called digital applications of Web3 tech, which means digital and physical. So we have brought people together to, let's say, like make crafts together that were enabled by Web3 tech. So this probably makes no sense to anybody, but essentially we've like gone to hackathons and kind of like tested on the ground with real people to see what they would think about certain technologies. And sometimes the things that you might think internally wouldn't make sense actually do end up making a lot of sense when you're right in front of the customers or right in front of the people that you would be building things with. So all of that is to say, you should definitely talk to people, have your user interviews, don't just build things by yourself. And yeah, check out the Double Diamond, super good resource.
It's very interesting, Alan. I've not heard any Web3 founder or anybody working in the Web3 space actually going person with a physical product. That's quite interesting. But yeah, very familiar with Double Diamond since like I'm a designer, and I've even seen like triple diamond out there in LinkedIn nowadays, which is quite interesting. But yeah, definitely check out the Double Diamond. I think the first diamond is very specifically focused on the research and really trying to see if we're solving for the right problem or not. But hopefully that was it. Nitek, go for it.
Yeah. I'll share a couple of things. I feel like the things that Elaine and Alana shared, I'll share my experience of like being in the weeds and like having gone through some of those challenges of like not following what you shared. So for example, with my first startup, I did exactly the opposite of what Elaine said, right? Like, is you need to test before you build. And I was so excited about the idea, etc. We ended up, spending a lot of time and effort just building the product right away. Like, we were like, okay, we know what people want, like, based on our the conversations we've had, the pain points we've experienced, and we just went straight to building the product. And looking back, that was one of the big lessons that I learned, was when we invested, let's say, like 3 to 6 months in building a product and we launched it, the people that we were building it for, they actually didn't find it as valuable as we thought they would. So that was one of the downsides of not investing enough time into the research, into trying to decide and just trying to learn from users before we build, like, what is it that they're trying to solve, what's the best way for us to solve that. And so that was like an early lesson that I had in my startup journey. And then this was about almost 7 to 8 years ago now. And I'll contrast that with what with the newest startup that I'm working on right now. We actually launched our first landing page for it 7 days ago, and we set a goal to not build anything till we have 10 people who are willing to sign up for this and pay to have this problem solved before we even start building it. And so in the last 7 days, we've been through almost like 3 iterations of the landing page, and just touching on the positioning aspect as well, which I think someone in the chat mentioned. We iterated on the positioning of the product before we even built it, just because we were getting so much valuable feedback from people before investing all the engineering and design resources into actually building the product. So I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, both from a design perspective and from a founder's perspective, is this idea that one of my mentors that shared it with me is to sell and then build. So you discover the pain points, you sell what it would be like to have those pain points addressed and tackled. And then if you see enough traction, you see enough interest, and you see that people are willing to pay for it and actually take actions to use that product, then you make the promise to say, okay, we'll start working on this, and we'll keep we'll get you the product in X amount of weeks or months. And it feels a bit counterintuitive to do that, and it almost is not the norm. But it's really effective because you're getting all the feedback before investing so much time and money into it.
Mhm. Very well said. Pre-sale got really important, like validating exactly what you just said. As from common thread from everything I'm listening is like, gauge interest from your users you're solving, talk to your users, get as much feedback as you can, and then you might know what you're solving is for the right thing or not. That seems to be the common thread. If y'all are not able to understand the rest of this panel, fire talk or fireside chat, and maybe just focus on that what I just said. Chris also has a very interesting question that about the pay factors. I'll probably leave that towards the end, or like maybe it would be like in about 30 minutes we'll touch on that question. Meantime, I'll move on to the other question which I have. Can y'all share like a story on when y'all were working for a company, or when you were building a product for, or your own product, that the product that you were working was like wrong, or maybe like you feel like this is the right product, you feel like this is the wrong product? Either or. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Maybe have one person start with that, and then the other person can pick on the wrong or something.
Yeah. I can share a story about a tech startup that I helped in 2008, so it's like a long time ago. So when this company came to me, he was like one founder, right? He was both the CEO and the CTO. So he actually built a site by himself that is, to help people very easily make animations. So back then the company was called Go Animate. Some of the people in the tech community might have used this product because it lets you very easily make animation, just drag and drop characters and drag and drop sound, and then you can make an animation without knowing any graphic design or programming at all. So when he came to me, he built the site and it was kind of ugly. He actually hired the wrong designer. He hired a illustrator to do his brand. It was called My Skits. And I was like, well, unless you live in the States, nobody knows what skits means, right? Yeah. So he was struggling, by himself. And when he came to me, I was like, originally I didn't believe that he needed my service because back then I was in Hong Kong, and this was 2008. It was so early. A lot of people didn't even know what the hell user experience is or product market fit is. But he actually worked at Oracle in the US before, and then he went back to Hong Kong. So we started within 1 month. So it was just me and him sitting in one room for 1 month, and then we cranked it out. So it started with paper sketching, like paper prototyping. Yeah. And we looked at other competitors. And then eventually he launched first on Facebook. He went on CNN. He went on TechCrunch. Now his company, after, all these years, it's already a 100 people company with 3 offices in Hong Kong, San Mateo, and Taiwan. And he already stepped down as the CEO. He already hired a CEO and he's the chairman now. So I exited the company. So so because we do part fee, part equity. And but back then he totally had he wasn't involving users. He had the wrong name for the company because the name My Skits didn't communicate anything about animation, right? Yeah. So that was usually it's the tech startups that come to us is they're feeling a lot of pain, like it's not going anywhere. Like they build a product and it's not going anywhere. It's not raising enough funds or getting enough traction. After we did the prototype, he actually went to Silicon Valley and raised $1.4 million and came back and did this thing. So that was one story.
Wow. I can't tell if that's a example of a wrong product or right product. Seems like he started with the wrong product.
It was the wrong at the
right
beginning.
product.
Yes.
That's
But he
awesome.
didn't know what was wrong because he was hiring the wrong designers for the project. Yeah.
That's some great story. That was like weirdly touching both aspects. Alana or Nitek, do you have any stories? Something like that?
Yeah, I could hop in. I don't really have one particular story, but I have like a more broad theme. So I think something that I notice is people that are entering startup land get really complex at first because they have all these ideas and it feels like your MVP is never going to be enough, your minimum viable product, that you need to deliver on an entire ecosystem for your viral loop to make sense and for you to find product market fit and get people through your funnel. But I think being in Web3, you see a lot of overly complex things, which just confuses everybody. So my one piece of advice and something that we've really had to work with as well is try to pare down your scope and just try to do one thing really well and find out who is that one target demographic who's really going to pay for this. And, there's funny things to this as well. Like you could still have like sub segments. So you could have an end user and then a different customer. So for example, you could end up having like kids as your end users for your product, but the parents are actually the customers who are paying for the thing. So there's things like that, but I think really honing down on what your product offering is and the complexity. So for us, like we were working on this NFT project that got really complex and everybody was doing crazy narratives and marketing campaigns and investing so much in lore building, but it really just took everyone away from what they really wanted, which was to make money off these tokens, which kind of sucks. Like it's not a very humanistic user prop there, but realistically, when the projects that weren't making people money by not having good like economic structures associated with their tokens weren't working, their projects fell apart. So there's weird things like that, really just honing down on your offering.
I love how you are very open and straight with your what you were saying. Like, yeah, they're here to make money. It's pretty there, but definitely the point where you touched on, like, who would want to buy this? Find your target demographic. I think super important. I think, especially in the Web3 space, because Web3 space did blow up for a reason, and I feel like there were certain people, some people targeted the right people there, so definitely very, very important. Naitik, you probably have a few could share.
Yeah, I'll share a couple of quick stories. One is from, so the first startup I was working on, we were trying to connect people with disabilities to jobs in tech. And initially, when I mentioned, like, yes, we spent a bunch of time building the product and then trying to, sell or figure out a revenue stream. So we had spent a lot of time building a community, a mentorship program for people with different disabilities to, get prepared for the job interview process for tech roles. And we spent a whole bunch of time building up this community, building up the program, in the hopes that once we do train up and once we do, help the different folks in the community get ready for the interviewing process, that we could approach tech companies and see if they're willing to pay to hire from the community, if they're willing to support the work that we're doing. And so in that example, we built a bunch of things and then we went to the tech company saying, hey, look at what we've built. Like, do you want to pay us for this? And in that instance, we just weren't able to get that initial revenue, and the tech companies weren't, they were interested in what we were doing, but not enough to be willing to pay for it. And so that was the moment when we realized, okay, like, I think we have to change something about the process here. And so that's when I kind of like flipped the approach, and then I just asked the different, our target customers, like, okay, it's okay if you are not willing to pay for what we have right now. What is it that you would be willing to pay for? Like, what's a problem that you have in this space that is important enough to you when it comes to hiring, when it comes to disability related hiring initiatives? And, through that process, we ended up pivoting what we were building as a community into a job board, because they wanted more direct access to, they wanted more direct access to be able to post jobs, and vice versa. The community also wanted more direct access to the companies. So through that process, like, we ended up first asking the companies, like, would you pay for this? They said yes, and then we went ahead and built out the job board, and that's how we ended up pivoting and getting some customers to keep moving forward with. And then the other example I'll share is from MemberStack. So I was the first employee at MemberStack, with the two founders, and they had, so with MemberStack, we were able to grow the product to over $1 million in annual recurring revenue. And one of the things that we learned in that process was, early on, we were building like a way for people to add user signups and logins to their websites without writing code. And instead of building the whole software, and spending all this time upfront without validating the problem, what the founders had done was they started an agency, and they said, like, we'll help you add only user logins and signups to your website. We don't really have a product, etc., but you'll still get to the same end goal. So we'll just do it manually for you. And through that process, they tested out with the first, a few customers, their willingness to pay, how excited they are to have this problem solved. And through that process, they realized, wow, like, people are willing to pay for this. And it would save us a lot of time if we had some sort of product that was able to do this instead of us doing it manually every single time. And so that was an example, when they realize, like, oh, we're actually building the right product because people are willing to pay for it upfront and they're excited about it. And then that transition from an agency service-based model into what became a software product. So hopefully those two examples are helpful.
So those are great examples. Feel like, yes, we hear a lot about these stories, but when you haven't seen many who actually are able to go and get it done to that level. That's amazing. My next question was going to be, what strategies do you use to validate your product idea? But I think we already went through it quite a bit from everybody's stories here. But does anybody have anything they haven't said regarding this, would like to say, or we can just move to another question?
We usually use a method called UX Radar. Because what I found is designers are very fuzzy logic people. But when we talk to tech and business people, they don't like fuzzy logic. It's numbers and it's matrices, right? So with UX Radar, like what we can do is we can different attributes. Like for example, is this product easy to use? Is it attractive? Is it usable? Is it fast enough? Is it blah, blah, blah. So each of these attributes you can rate from 0 to 7. Okay, so when we first engage with a tech start, we ask them, hey, why don't you do a body check first? So using their existing product, we'll run it through like, I don't know, 6 to 8 users or even less. And with that feedback, you can already see very objectively how well your product is doing. Like if it's completely unusable, like people rate it really low, like 2, right? If it's very useful, they're going to rate it high. So the founding team can see objectively how the market is reacting to their product. Instead of doing like a huge 3-month research before they know anything, like this can be done very, very quickly within like two weeks or something like that, with their existing customers or users. And also one other point is because some I think somebody asked in the chat that as a designer, how do you convince tech people or founders? I think some of these methods will be useful because it makes decision easier. And in our design language, we call it user research, right? And user testing. But in tech founders, business people, they don't understand our language. So I would just say it's product market fit or product validation.
It's very important. Like, yeah, huge. Yeah, as a designer going to the more entrepreneurial sense, there's a huge
language shift, I think.
Language barrier, yes.
Because when we say user research, like typically most business and tech people are like, we don't have time for research. I mean, like they're thinking it's going to be 1 or 2 years like academic research. So I'm like, no. Google does this too. It's only going to take like a few weeks, and you can test things out very fast, like dirty, easy. Yeah.
Right. Alana and Naitik, do you have anything else about other strategies that you haven't mentioned, or we can just move to the other question? It's fine. Okay.
I think maybe, I was just gonna say like the solid workshop, whatever your version of a workshop is, like take an hour and a half and run your client through it. When I used to do more freelance work, specifically branding people and creating their portfolios for them, you'd have to get a sense of what their story is, what are their strengths, what do they want to highlight. You can think of a business as the same thing. And so some businesses don't even know who they are. Some people don't even know who they are. So you kind of have to be the facilitator as a designer and help them kind of come to those conclusions. So one thing that I really like to do, I take from the root cause analysis that you typically learn in like social innovation classes. And what you do is you start with a very broad problem. It could be like obesity is affecting a lot of Americans. You can start there. And you just ask why continually until you get to the root causes. And what you'll find is that you might think obesity is just about food habits, when really it's connected to geographics and poverty and food deserts and maybe generational trauma. And there's just stuff like that that can really translate into your personal lives as well. So I do this on myself, I do this on my friends, I've done this on my coworkers. So definitely have a toolkit of your own sort of turnkey workshops to run with and on people. I think that would really be good for strategy as well.
I love that. That definitely helps break it down to the root cause of the problem rather than just the symptoms. I feel like most of the time, a lot of startups are just trying to solve a symptom of a problem, but then they realize that, oh, there's so much more to this. But yeah, definitely love it. Okay, next question. I feel like it's a very important question. How do we prioritize features, and what is your strategy for saying no to certain ideas or suggestions? I think that's a huge problem we have in our current world.
There is a tool called importance difficulty matrix. I can show it quickly if you guys want. But what I find is usually founders do this. Okay, so founders are really excited about their baby, and then usually like every week they go meet other people, meet other founders, investors, so they get super excited and come back and say, hey, engineering team, why don't we add these like 5 other features? So every week there's like 5 other new features, so eventually the product becomes like a Frankenstein, because there's no planning, right? And there's no priority as to what is important. So one thing that we do is personas and user journeys, which is like the toolkit for UX people, right? I think these 2 things are the GPS of a product, because if your team, like let's say your core team, you have like a business guy, a hustler, like a tech guy, you have marketing, sales. Like if you're not on the same page, then your ship is not going to the same direction, right? I've coached teams where the CEO is not on the same page as the CMO. They're thinking different users. So until I came in, like they didn't even know they were looking at different directions, right? That until we like kind of mapped it out on the wall for them to see it, then they realize, oh, wow, we're actually talking about completely different people. So yeah, so personas, user journeys, and importance difficulty matrices, 3 tools that we use.
Well, very important tools. Can you type them down, Elaine?
Let me show like a quick glimpse of what an importance difficulty matrix is. I think this is super useful because it forces teams. Okay, so here's a matrix where, can you see at the bottom here, it's low importance to high importance, and then high difficulty to low difficulty, right? So you put all your ideas, let's say like put all your ideas here, and then you need to, so the post-it notes needs to go up like an elevator. So each row can only have 1 post-it note. So your team needs to discuss, right? And afterwards there's a, so it's like 4 quadrants. If it's on the top right-hand corner, those are very important and very difficult. The lower right-hand corner is very important and relatively easy, right? And then the left side will be very difficult and not very important. And then the left bottom part is not important and very easy, right? So the logical step is you should be focusing on, here, which is very important and very easy to do, and the strategic things, right? The luxury things, like forget it, like don't do it, or do the ones that are very easy and less important. Like if these are usually usability stuff over here, then just fix it right away. Yeah. And this really forces the team to make very difficult decisions. Otherwise, usually teams will talk over each other. Like they'll be talking features that are 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 3 years, like, and in the same conversation, right? So that, and we force them to make a decision. Okay, so this, if you're talking about like long-term stuff, like put it in that category here. And then some things that we can do in 1 to 3 months, we'll focus on that. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. I have something similar, but this is definitely more detailed. Can you also, like, it's great that you showed a visual. Can you type it down?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Take a look at it. Awesome. Thank you. Alana or Nitek, you have any ways you prioritize features or suggestions on how to say no?
Yeah, while Elaine was speaking, I just remembered the good old SWOT analysis, which is like one of the best things I learned when I was in business school. So a SWOT essentially stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal to you as a company. Threats and opportunities are dependent on the market. So how you can kind of use this is you can crisscross them. So you can look at your strengths, you know, in position to different opportunities and to thwart some threats. And same with weaknesses. You can put those in perspectives of what opportunities your competitors may have and what threats are out there. So sometimes, you know, the things that you want to do are decided for you by if you really want to do something, but you're going to be a bit weak at it, you probably shouldn't do it, even if you really want to be doing that. And if there's a big opportunity for a certain, like let's say Gen Z people are really into a certain trend right now, and you could pivot your product to service that, and you have a lot of Gen Z people in your network, you know, maybe that's a better move than sticking to your current market. So I think being very adaptable is important. And in terms of saying no to things, I've definitely struggled with this. Even though I'm the only designer on my team, and I definitely do call the shots when it comes to products, but sometimes it's hard to say no because you also may not know. I think there's an assumption that the lead designers like know what's going on at all times, but I think there are a lot of unknowns with startups. So I think the first step is finding out what the unknowns are and figuring out like how are the different ways you can back up a no. And sometimes, or a lot of the times, that has to do with your intuitions, but just finding ways to prove that. So again, like returning to the user research or these different matrices to sort of prove out what you're already thinking inside. And having conversations, just having the bravery to voice it when you're the only person at the table who thinks a certain way, because more often than not, there's someone else that does think that, but they don't want to be the one. So you just sometimes just got to be the one to do it.
No, very, I love all these points you said. Definitely very valuable for designers here. If any of you are there, definitely follow this. But I'm really happy that you have the power to call the shots for your product. It feels good as a designer to be able to do that. Naitik.
Yeah, I'll share my example from MemberStack. So we had I think we took into account like many different pieces of feedback to decide like how we're building what's next for us and for the customers. So there's two types of information we would look at. So one is like internally, we would look at the overall like strategy in terms of how we want to position ourselves in the market as a product. What are the things that differentiate us from other tools, and how do we lean into some of those trends? And on the other side, from the customer feedback perspective, we had things like surveys that would go out to customers. So anyone who's been paying for the product for 30 days, we would then ask them, we would trigger an email that gets sent to them saying, hey, in the last 30 days, like, how are you happy with the product? Is there anything we can do? And so we would do a lot of like, basically get a lot of user feedback that was kind of almost like we had like a drip system where feedback would come in from different places and be in a centralized location, and we would go through that when making product decisions. We would also do this survey, which was made pretty which is making the rounds on the internet, is called the product market fit survey, which is something that was put together by the founder of Superhuman, and is a really cool way to like the main question that the survey is anchored around is you're asking your most important users and customers, like, how disappointed would you be if you couldn't use this product tomorrow? And the options are usually like very disappointed, not disappointed, or somewhat disappointed. And then they would, based on people who say, oh, I'd be very disappointed if I couldn't use this product tomorrow, they would then ask them, like, why would you be disappointed? Like, what are the things that actually keep you excited to use this product? And what are some things that would get you even more excited about it? And then vice versa. What are, for people that say, hey, I wouldn't be disappointed, if I couldn't use this product tomorrow. those would be telling of like what types of people were maybe like non-fit users or customers, maybe weren't resonating with the pain point as much. So we had a lot of like feedback coming in from there. And we also had a pretty active Slack community, which we still do. There's a few thousand users essentially that were always asking questions, sharing feedback. So we had more of a community element to it. So we were always in the loop with what challenges our users are navigating. So taking all of that information, we would then try and figure out what's next for us. The other thing is we would not plan ahead more than, let's say, like a month or two. And this is, I think, depending on the type of startup and product, this may or may not work. But for us, we realized that our scenario was changing so quickly, like in terms of the feedback we were getting, and there's so many variables in that process that we would plan the roadmap for, like, let's say the next 4 weeks, and before we get to that 4 weeks, we would then have to again plan out the following 4 weeks. And so it was more of a tight knit, like, closed feedback loop that we operated on.
That's amazing. I posted some links about the Superhuman product market fit engine. Definitely was very popular just before pandemic. I remember seeing it. I forgot about it completely. Yeah, thanks for reminding that. Looking at the time, we unfortunately only have Nightic until 6:30 today, but we do have Alana and Elaine a little bit longer than that. So I was thinking like maybe you can just open up a Q&A, small short Q&A session until Nightic needs to go, and then we'll go back to our questions. So in the meantime, if anybody has any questions for us, or especially Nightic, raise your hands and then I'll call your name. Then you can unmute your mic and have an interaction with us. Okay. Yeah, we'll wait.
Well, I think there's a question here in the chat on where I don't know the background of this person, but they mentioned that when they were trying to save, when they said no to a certain feature and trying to save design and development effort, the PM insisted to include it, and saying that unless you put it out there, how would we know if this feature is needed or not? So as a product designer, this is a question. And how would you navigate this situation? I think in my case, I would see if there's ways to validate and test that specific feature or the need for that feature without actually building it. So in some ways, it kind of addresses both sides, where the PM's concern is like, we should be testing it. There's a chance it could be valuable. And then your concern is that we don't want to invest too much, design and development time. And so I would look at ways to basically validate, even with things like either like no code, through like prototypes, even walking users through a Figma prototype, for example, can be helpful. Sometimes we would even share like wireframes with users, which are very like low fidelity, and just trying to get the idea and point across and have them click through basically gray boxes and tell us if this is something they would want to see. So I think I would look at like low effort ways to almost like mimic the same experience. And there's a technique in design called like the Wizard of Oz technique, where essentially you manually run the prototype. Let's say I've seen examples where in university, for example, we used to like draw mobile app wireframes, but we would draw them on paper and we would give it to a potential user and say, if you want to tap on a specific button, just like put your finger there and we'll change the screen manually. Like we'll put the next sheet of paper on top. And so things like that would surprisingly actually yield a lot of feedback on whether or not, a specific user experience or feature would be helpful. But Alana and Elaine, is there anything else you want to add to that question?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think sometimes as designers, using a lot of analogies would work. For example, I often tell tech founder teams, it's like before you build an 80-story building, if you don't build a demo home, before you buy a $1 million house, you go to look at a fake house, right? And it's not until, and you have beautiful brochures, but the building is not built yet, right? It's pre-sale, right? It's pre-sale. So it's good enough, and it's fake because the doors are not there, or the wardrobe can only hang like three shirts, right? But it's real enough that people are gonna be willing to put down money, right? Even investors. So that analogy I think works really well, especially for markets that are familiar with real estate. The other analogy is like writing a book. If you want to write a book, well, in the old days with publishers, you don't write the entire book of like 1,000 pages, right? You write, the title, you write chapter 1 and maybe chapter 3 and give a sense of what this book is going to be like. And then the publisher says, yes, okay, I think this is a good idea, before you write the entire thing. So it's the same process, but somehow in software world, maybe it's too easy to code and take down code. Actually, I know engineers hate taking down code. So, so doing like a fast prototype quickly without code actually saves them the light of day, right? It saves them so much work, because once your marketing sales goes out to talk to customers, they'll be like, oh, well, that's not really what we want. And then you have to go back to tell your engineers and programmers to tear down the building. They'll be like, I want to kill you, right? so this method is tried and true method. So I really advise tech founders, business people, to really use this method instead of burning all your cash and then having to raise another round of funding, right?
Right. No, very important. Alana, you have anything to add on this?
That was all really well said. I will say that I think a healthy dose of experimentation is important. So at the same time, I do agree things do need to be tested. But again, like using lower fidelity things to do it, I think is good.
Anyone else in the chat has any questions? Okay, we have our hands raised. Andre, you can unmute and ask your question directly. I want some interaction here. It'll be great.
Hello. I have a question regarding, I'm a product designer in the startup, and at what point do you understand that it's not worth investing your time and energy into communicating your executives to do stuff properly, as you're saying in this presentation? Like, what are some red flags that you see like that's not worth the investment?
I would say it sounds like you're trying to give up, being in the company. But really, I think it's more about learning the business language. Yeah, because designers usually talk design, and we're just not aware that we often use words that other people don't understand. It's like Venus and Mars. Like, if you talk to business and tech people, we really need to talk their language, which is about business, right? It's about ROI. It's about saving money. It's about, scaling the company, getting more customers. So it's never about like nice looking buttons, like people don't care, right? So yeah, I think it's learning how to talk to other disciplines and seeing from their perspective instead of our perspective. That's my advice for design background or product people. Yeah,
I have some hot takes about red flags. One of the first startups I worked for, where I transitioned from a market research intern to a product designer, was a really talented scientist. So they knew a lot about science and the foundations of the product, but they weren't necessarily like a product person. And one of the ways this showed up is we were working on a very complex product for seniors. So, which means like the UX needs to be extremely smooth and extremely easy. And there's more friction in many more places. But the team did not find it important to invest in really good third-party services that would basically expedite this UX. Like they wanted to build everything by hand. It's like they would vouch for a cheaper alternative, which would in turn make the product look sketchy because older folks find weird looking things that look sketchy. You know, there's just things like that. So I think if the directors of the company are not value aligned on the principles that you feel are for how you go about product, you know, that could cause a lot of frustration. I know for me, it's like I would design all these amazing mocks and they would take them to trade shows and really talk it up. But then the end product looked nothing like it because they would end up going, you know, cutting corners and all these things. I think you know that they're not really design focused. You've probably heard of the term like design focused companies. Airbnb is one of these, and Airbnb is really interesting because at Config, the Figma conference earlier this year, the founder talked about how they got rid of all their PMs. And it was a really radical strategy, but it really empowered all their designers to really make everything extremely design focused. So I'm not saying you should end up in a place with no PMs, but you know, finding people that are value aligned with you and will make the same trade-offs that you would make and that you like value the mentorship from, I think is really important. And I just saw that you mentioned that the founder is a designer. So um, you might also have to trust them. I don't know. I mean, that's how they want to run their ship and you're kind of on their ship. So it's kind of like up to you on how you want to go about growing with these people.
Mhm. Very well said. So important.
Yeah, thank you. I understand it from the position of fractional CXO. Like you have more motivation because you have more ownership in the company and like you make more leading decisions. But if you're just like an employee, it sucks.
I think part of the issue is sometimes the word design is very confusing. Some founders think designers are just like making interface pretty. So if that's their concept, then you're on the wrong ship, right? You need to find founders or tech people who know exactly what you do, you know, before you join the company, probably.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. I really appreciate design strategy.
I have a question from Cameron. Cameron, would you like to just unmute your mic and say it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I am just curious on your thoughts around, you know, it's often these two things like product quality. I mean, I think it's like speed, quality, and scope are like the, you know, the three parts of the triangle, but they often say that you can only have two parts of the triangle, not all three. But like usually I think when we talk to product managers, like there's often this kind of like, you know, I think everyone's just trying to ship product really fast, not and then, you know, get all the scope that we want in, but like when it comes to quality, that's often, you know, sacrifice. And so I'm curious, like kind of from your perspectives as you know, design startup leaders, like, you know, like, you know, do you have a hot take or a perspective on this? Is it like, you know, fine to, do you approach it as like, you know, reduce your scope so that you can get a balanced product out there? Are you willing to like kind of take that hit on the time, or are you like, it doesn't matter about the quality until it gets out into the market, and then that you validate your hypotheses, and then you can make it better from there?
Maybe Nitek wants to answer because he you have to leave first. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think this is a great question. I experienced this actually even on MemberStack when we were building together. We all had different perspectives on like how much time we want to invest. Say, let's say in the speed at which we ship things, the quality at which we ship, and then the scope at which we ship. And one of the things we did to address kind of some of the friction was to essentially sit down as a team, and to talk through our high level like philosophy or approach on how we want to be building the product, and realize that there were, for some people, speed was more important, while for others like quality was more important. And so we tried to first start at that point and say, okay, like what are some, if we were to prioritize and come up with almost like our design philosophy or design guidelines, or even overall like our product philosophy, what would that look like, and what are some values that we want to embody when we're like shipping product. And that really helped us all, one, like listen to all the different perspectives, because everyone has their own reason for why they would value one over the other, but to also hear everyone's perspectives and then make certain trade-offs together to say, okay, we're making the shared decision to say that for us, we would rather ship fewer things at a higher quality, or maybe for a different team, it is that we want to ship at all costs and we would rather look at quality later. And so trying to come to that consensus, not at a feature level, but more at a team and communication cooperation level, like really helped us have a shared language, so that when we did get to features, we could point back to that and say, hey, back when we talked about this, we decided to prioritize speed. And in order to, continue like actually embodying that value, like let's make these trade-offs for the specific feature. So that's how we addressed it at MemberStack. But yeah, Elena and Elaine, do you want to add to it?
Actually, before we continue, Natik, how much time do you have?
Thanks for reminding me. I do have to jump, but I'm happy to connect online if folks do have more questions. You can find me on LinkedIn, or I'm very accessible, so you can feel free to drop me a message. I'm also on the VDC Slack, so if you want to just DM me on that, I'm happy to continue the conversation. But thanks so much for having me.
Also, do you have anything that your current project you're working on you want to shout out?
It's in stealth right now, but if you want to follow along on LinkedIn, I would love to keep you in the loop. We just launched last week. We are doing, like I said, pre-validating with some paid signups, and so we're starting to build out the product, but I'll be sharing more over the next few weeks and months.
Excited to see them all. Yeah, thanks for coming, Natik.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
Now we'll continue, I guess, Alana or Elaine, continuing with Cameron's question.
I actually think I can see both sides. I can see speed to market is very important, especially if you're a business owner, and if you're running out of money, like you only have a runway of like 3 to 6 months, and if you don't move fast, then you need to fire your staff, right? And quality is also important, because like if you don't have quality, like your customer's not going to come back. But I'm wondering if I can just share quickly a screen. I think some of you might have seen this. It's like, instead of build like this, like car from like, one wheel, two wheel, like whole car, like do like a rapid. So it's about scope, I think, right? If you can scope it well, like pare it down to like the very, very minimum product, but do it very, very well, but it's a very small product. And then, the next version, make it a little bigger and bigger. Like maybe this method will balance both speed and quality and not have to, do one or the other. Yeah.
For sure. Very important. Like we scope creep, like we start with the big product, then we scope creep a lot. So, Alana, you have anything for this?
I love that graphic. That was so good. I've never seen that before, but I love that. Such a great analogy. I was gonna say something super unsatisfying, but it really depends. It depends on your target audience. I think so. For example, in my space, people are super scrappy, and a lot of the biggest products have come out of hackathons. So often my team and I will travel to different hackathons around the States, and we'll just be hacking on fun projects. And these things are done in 48 hours or less. So they are often missing some nuts and bolts, but the core functionality is there. And really it's for us, like just showing people the value and letting them have the imagination to take it further. So part of it is having good enough storytelling. I think the storytelling kind of fills the gaps, or if you are cutting out some of the quality for speed's sake. And I know when it's pre-product market fit, it can be really tough. But I think this comes back to, what's your happy path? What's your value prop? You don't need to build all the things, and it's probably a good sign to cut things down if you're coming to this triangle. Like if your scope is that big that you have to start delegating, I think it's worth looking at the core product, and also leaning on partners potentially. Like one side of it is doing things manually, but also are there other partners that you can have that can fill the gaps for the product so that you're not just building the whole thing from scratch.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. I have one question I wanted to ask, and then I think we can just have it like an open Q&A, starting from Chris's and then Joyce's question. I think if that's all right with everyone. The last question that I had from my list was, how do you balance innovation with practicality when developing new tech products? I feel like everybody's all about innovation, such a big like hot word out there all the time.
I don't think it's a either or. I think for tech startups, the ultimate proof in the pudding is, are people willing to pay for a product? Right. Because whether it's innovative or practical, if nobody wants to pay, it's no use either way, right? Yeah. So are people willing to open up their wallet and pay you? It's the ultimate test. And that's what investors want to hear too, right? If nobody wants to pay for a product, they're not going to invest in you, because investors want you to make them like 30% ROI per year. So they don't. So it's a better investment option than investing in stocks, bonds, like mutual funds, right?
Yeah, especially with AI that's going around right now. Everybody feels like they need to innovate with AI. But are people gonna pay for it at the end of it? Like, questionable still. But yeah, Alana, do you have anything for this innovation perspective on it?
I think that was great. Like the end user, if they pay for it or not. I also feel like what's the most practical for some people might be the most innovative thing, or innovation leads to things being more practical or more easy to use. So yeah, but Elaine said it well. Yeah.
That was all the questions. That was all most of the questions I wanted to go through before we open up the Q&A. Okay, now I think we can open up the Q&A with Chris's question. Chris, would you like to unmute and expand on your question?
Sure. So like I say in the question there, we're going into an invite-only beta. So this could be anywhere from a dozen to 100 users. We can always dream. But I guess the question is how can we really stay on top of getting feedback from folks without being naggy, I guess is the thing. Like, how do you walk that line, and how do you ways to help build sort of that community of core users that are giving you back really good feedback. Like I said, we're looking to use Discord. We're going to use some plugins to push, show our pull requests to show that we're actually addressing people's concerns and things like that, and have a discussion and polls on features and things like that. But looking for other ideas that perhaps folks who've been through this before have found useful.
Sure. Well, here's where fractional CXO comes in. So I've seen a lot of startups, the way they engage feedback from end users or like send out surveys. Okay, send out surveys. I mean, while it's useful on one end, however, you most of the time you can't understand the why behind the answer, because the survey is question number 1, ABC, like question number 2, ABC. But have you ever filled in surveys where you're like, my answer is not ABC, is DEF, right? But I have no way to tell the company about it. So what we do usually, like in like user experience, is we actually do like user research, what we call exploratory research. And it has to be face-to-face. It has to be like over Zoom or face-to-face with the person, because you can always drill down like 5 levels asking the why, like what Alana said. It's understanding their motivations, behaviors, and attitudes. And sometimes questions have like 2 layers of questions. Some are usability questions about your product, but some are actually even deeper questions, like maybe like sometimes maybe you've built the wrong product, and I've seen a lot of tech startups, they focus so much on the product that they forget that users are not living around your product, right? Okay, a typical example is crypto right now, right? There's only 5% adoption worldwide, right? And if you're expecting users to spend all their time to understand how to buy a Bitcoin or Ethereum, most people don't do that, right? They're not engineers. They don't read the entire manual. So the key is to design around the user's natural way of doing things. So for exploratory research, what we usually do is we understand how they usually operate, like their workflow. So for example, Chris, what's your product about?
It is a climate aware PFM. So
Climate aware, sorry?
climate aware PFM. So we're really trying to get folks to just understand the nuts and bolts of managing your finances, but also for folks to understand while they're doing that how they bank and where they spend their money has an impact on the planet. So we're trying to bring consumption and climate awareness to folks, along with the very basics, like, are you got a savings account, do you have an emergency fund, those types of things, and just bring that overall awareness that as consumers we have power, and get folks to understand that while they're managing their money.
I see. Yeah. So basically you have a hypothesis, and the process of engaging users is to test if your hypothesis is valid or real, right? We've done financial products like I've designed Quicken back in 2003, a long time ago. Back then we actually went to people's homes. We looked at how they do their finances. Do they put it on Excel spreadsheets? Do they put their receipts under their bed? And that's really understanding how they view finances. We even had post-it notes for them to write out like their mental models of how they view like savings, checking, rainy day money, like debt, yeah. So I would say there are questions about how to design around the user's worldview versus like usability questions, which is like a lower level kind of questions. Yeah.
I want to ask also, Chris, like, who is your target demographic?
Our target demographic is 18 to 35.
Oh, okay, cool. So that's like my age group. Is there a reason you're choosing to use Discord?
My CTO is a big fan of Discord, so there's been a lot of, we're going to use Discord to get people into it. And I have asked the question, what's the overlap between all the folks that we want to reach and all the folks that we want to reach that are comfortable, already have Discord, etc. So that's a great question. Maybe I'll invite you to our next meeting.
Yeah, because I say this because most Web3 projects use Discord. I used to use it for work. I hate it. I think the UX on it is crazy. Like, it doesn't have nested threads.
I agree.
So I would say to you, like, initially when we were working on, we did like a streetwear NFT project, and essentially brought in people who were interested in streetwear into Web3, and most of these people were actually like 30s to 40s. So they already knew about Discord because a lot of NFT jargon just goes on there, but even they find it kind of cumbersome to use. So when I conducted interviews with people, I actually ended up getting their emails, keeping warm connections with them through there, having like bi-weekly focus groups and inviting people and making sure they felt special, making sure like, hey, you're our exclusive representatives, like you're gonna get some sort of benefits from this, and we really value your opinion. Do things to make them feel special, like they're in this beta group. I think also when you're speaking to younger adults nowadays, people want to feel like they're making a difference. Like, if you're looking at climate and financial management, and maybe, where your RRSP stuff is going, like maybe it's going into bonds that you don't really want to be investing in, you can spin it
Exactly.
into like a value add of, you're supporting the environment or something. Basically, Gen Zs and younger millennials, like we want to feel like we're helping. And a lot of us are very apathetic as well. I think a lot of people are apathetic in general, which is why a lot of, I think, startups kind of struggle in this area. Or, I mean, we're all struggling in every area.
Yeah.
But
No, I totally get you. I think the apathy comes from people just feeling overwhelmed and disempowered, and for me, we want to be able to just put the information in front of you, give you the ability to understand what's going on with your finances, and then bringing in that climate aspect to it. Like, for example, if you bank with RBC, they're the top tar sands financier in the world. So if you have savings accounts
oh
with them,
wow.
they're taking your money and investing it in the tar sands. If you think that's cool, then okay. If you don't, then maybe you should do something about it. But it's putting that information in front of people just in a very straightforward fashion is very powerful. We've often said we're like Fitbit, and or like Apple Watch. It's just the information's there, and just the awareness is like first step. And then second step is, yeah, you can do something, so educate, inform, empower, that's where we kind of want to go. And we have a longer roadmap with other types of things, like you spoke to investments, of course, but yeah, it's trying to make sure that those beta users are, they're giving up their time, and then you need to make them feel special, and you need to make them feel like engaged. So it sounds like what you're saying is just be hands-on, Zoom meetings, email, just keep things warm.
Yeah, I think for the older ones who maybe have more fleshed out professional lives and want to contribute in a more hands-on way and, value product building. Like I think when like I was interested to sign up for Google's user research things because I feel like I have an important opinion. So I feel like there is that segment, but I feel like after what you just said, like I didn't like I banked with RBC and I didn't know they were doing that. And what you said, I was like, damn, I wish there's a little Instagram carousel that told me that, because then that might have maybe
Okay.
made me look into your product. So I feel like you should, if you're targeting, let's say like 20-year-old young women, hire a 20-year-old young woman to make TikToks being like, look at this new financial product. I didn't realize this was going on, and actually and it's crazy how many people will just give their opinions for free on social media because everyone has something to say, whether it's good or bad. So it might even be a part of this strategy isn't only like the, more high touch, high quality stuff, but also just getting your stuff out there if you have any mock-ups or wireframes and just seeing what people's snark opinions are, especially if
Okay.
you have a stance. And it sounds like you guys do have a stance, which is really good.
Yeah, and it's gotten us in trouble on Facebook. Believe it or not, you can advertise guns on Facebook super easy, but
Wow.
anything to do with climate change is considered politically contentious. And we've had so many of our ads flagged and banned. So we've essentially given up completely on Facebook, which are, whatever, no great loss. But we found once we add the aspect of climate change to it, people go, whoa, what are you talking about here? These theories. And you're like, oh, okay, theories. All right, then maybe we're not talking to the right people. But I like your idea about TikTok. My oldest daughter is 17, and that's what she said to me. She said, I should just do
Yeah.
your TikToks. Like, Dad, you should never be on camera or anything. You should let your peers to your target audience do the talking. So that's great. Thank you for that.
You should get her to do it. And you should tell her to say this app's marketing was banned on Facebook because it was telling the truth. Like, make that narrative, get that narrative out there.
Ooh, I like that. Thank you.
It sounds like, Chris, you have an opportunity to first build a community because your target audience are probably people who care about climate change and the environment, right? So, maybe create the community first, and then, and then you can get feedback from the people.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. That sort of validates some concerns I had a while back that I sort of put on the side burner. But yeah, okay, thank you.
No, I love this back and forth I was going. Yeah, especially as someone who's I've been founded and run a lot of communities. Yes, definitely. This is the problem is big enough for to bring a community behind it. Hopefully, good luck, Chris, with your startup. Hopefully
Thank you very much.
Moving on to another question. Joyce, would you like to elaborate on your question? Because I feel like we might have answered it already, potentially. We could have said something already. Or I could just like say that aloud. How can we validate if a website versus an app should be built to begin with? Web with responsive design. I feel like this is more like a question that what product is right for you? Website, app, or maybe even could be even something like physical product or something else. I don't know. What do you all think, Elaine, Alana?
I think you have to first go back to who you're targeting, like what age group, like what's their lifestyle. Are they in California driving all the time? I mean, are they mobile? Is it mobile first countries? So it really depends on your user, right? Like if it was in Asia, then it definitely is mobile first, but and what is the content of the product, right? Like if it's a lot of information and complex, you probably need a wide screen to see it. But if it's meant to be on the go, right, then it's probably mobile, right? So I think it goes back to who's your target user, and maybe it could also be cross, like from mobile to web, like let's say online banking, right? Like you would want to check your balances while you're mobile and then go back home to see like a full screen. So it could be both, right? So it depends on who you're targeting and what's the usage context. So the user journey and the persona would be key to decide this. Hope that answered your question, Joyce.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my microphone wasn't working earlier, but that answered the question because I feel like it is more of bringing back to users' need and knowing what would be the best channel for them to access those information. But at the same time, I was thinking more of if it's a web responsive design, would it be a better way to start off so that we have more or easier to demo it wherever users might find it through website and app so that we can start with something to help with the demo.
Because sometimes the context of using a feature in mobile might not be the same as if it's on the web. So and then because the mobile has such limited space, like maybe you show certain more important information versus others. Like you can't cram all the web information on the mobile. So you have to make some decisions, right? Yeah, like for example, Wealthsimple, like their web and their mobile is like different, right? So yeah, you have to go back to who's your user and when are they using it and why are they using it.
Is there a difference in terms of, I'm sure there will be a difference in approach. Say if they're both point out from users that half. Half of the user would go with web or half will go with app. Like, is there more of a preference or a best standard or best practice as to how we can approach in maybe like in this days, app will probably be more of the dominant way for people accessing.
I would really say, like, okay, Joyce, I know you do healthcare, right?
Yeah.
So let's say if your target audience is like a older person and they don't really use mobile that much, or they have a very old phone, then or maybe they won't even access the like My Care Compass on their mobile phone, right? Then that's not your target audience. So I would say really go back to who is using, right?
I see. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Really pinpointing on the user journey and finding who what would be the best scenario or use cases for them. Thank you.
I would also add that I think mobile apps No one wants to download more apps. I know my phone is full. I think the stat is like most people have 5 of the same app. So getting people to download a new app is tough. So if you were deciding between a web app versus mobile, I would say web is probably better. And then it saves you time having to develop like an Android and an iOS version. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Yeah, it's hard to have people downloading an app and versus just scanning QR code and accessing a website potentially.
So just so I understand what you said, Alana, you're talking about a mobile friendly web.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the act of downloading an app from an app store has barriers to it versus just having a mobile friendly site that can be accessed, on a regular desktop or on your phone is the best. But I think when it comes to finance though, because you're dealing with more sensitive information, I think that's a case where people might be more open to an app because a lot of the paradigms for dealing with your finances, like Simple, Questrade, all your banking, they do have their own apps. So in certain cases, if the behavior is skewed towards having an app, then I think it's okay. But when it's just like regular things that you're doing, I don't think everything needs to be an app.
Okay. I think that basically answers everything we have. Right. Does anyone else have any questions left? Raise your hands. Otherwise, maybe we can end it a little early because I know we said 7:30, but I think we can just end it at 7. What do you think, Elaine? Yeah.
Sure.
Otherwise, if nobody has a question, last question from me, from both of you, just summarizing and ending things. What advice would you like to give new tech startups when ensure they want to build a product that their customers will love?
Focus on building. Have you guys heard of vitamins versus painkillers? Like, people will pay for painkillers, but vitamins is nice to have. So I've seen a lot of tech startups build vitamins. Like, it's basically a problem that's nice to have, and people, are not willing to pay for as much. So really focus on what is the biggest pain point like that you're solving, right? Yeah. And also ask the right questions, because I've seen many startups like sometimes they do engage users, but 90% of the questions they ask are the wrong questions to ask. Like, oh, if we add this and this feature, would you buy this? Or so it's sort of like if you tell somebody, hey, if 5 years from now we have a car that flies, are you gonna buy it? Sort of question, where most people are going to say yes, and your questions are misleading yourself. Yeah, so making sure you ask the non-misleading questions, non-futuristic questions, would be really important.
Very important, asking the right questions. Alana.
Yeah, the last thing that I'd leave everybody with is this concept of positive friction, which I'll paste in the chat here. I came across this from this agency called BBTK. I think unfortunately they have closed down, but they have a lot of really good design philosophy. And what they're talking about here is that friction can be a good thing. I feel like the dominant train of thought and design currently is grease the funnel and the one-click checkout button and get everybody to get everywhere without thinking, and don't make me think, no cognitive load. But this short essay here argues that if we don't think, we don't feel. And if you are moving through all these user journeys and not feeling a single thing, then why are you even doing it? And I think this speaks to a need for more products that are more engaging, more joyful, more disruptive, and more interesting to use in this next phase of the internet. So I would challenge everybody to think about how they use friction and how they can build stronger narratives to really connect to the core of what their product is about.
Very great points. I would personally take a look at that. I feel like this reminds me of something that I was told, like in a video game. If you're going on the right direction, people are shooting back at you. But if people are not shooting back at you, yeah, you're going the wrong way. Very funny. Anyways, but that was the end of it. Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Elaine, for coming. If I can request everybody here to just do like a clap emoji, you know, just to show your appreciation for their time today and just answering such burning questions with some amazing insight. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to everyone who's here. You'll last until the end, till 7 o'clock. I don't know if y'all got any insights, but I definitely learned a lot today. Anyways, that's it. Thank you, everyone. You can go
Thank you,
ahead.
everyone. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Alana.
Thanks,
Thank
all.
you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.